All right, well, good morning, afternoon, depending on where you may be. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to today's Tivoli User Community Webcast. Our topic for today is ASAP University, integrating IBM Workload Scheduler with Active Directory and LDAP. All phone lines are currently in a listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with further instructions being given at that time. You may ask a question at any time during the presentation using the chat window located in the control panel. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation with the rest of the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded, and you'll be provided a copy of today's materials following the call. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Ray Erday is an architect for geographically diverse, active standby IBM workload automation environment for Enterprise Holdings Incorporated. He is a subject matter expert for all things IBM workload automation at EHI, an administrator, troubleshooter, and mentor to the EHI team for IBM workload automation. In addition, Ray is an SME for IBM License Metric Tool, DB2, and also had experience with IBM Sterling software for Managed File Transfer Solution, NetCool, and served as MS SQL Server Database Administrator. Ray, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, we'll go to our next slide here. Basically, we're going to cover the basics of LDAP authentication for workload automation, configuration of authorization inside of the Integrated Solution Console, TDWC, Tivoli Dynamic Workload Console, and Tivoli Workload Scheduler will not be covered, but I can probably answer some quick questions about those if you have any. Why would we want to do LDAP? Well, it will simplify user management. Basically, you can create groups inside of your Active Directory structure and put users in there, and then assign roles that those members of those groups will have access to inside of Tivoli Workload Scheduler and a Dynamic Workload Console. And so if you have a security group that manages Active Directory, that would then remove you from having to do all that management. And all you have to do is just sign up which groups have what access at one time, and then your responsibilities are then dropped after that. Here are some things you may want to consider while you're setting up your environment. If you're having more than one federated repository, like in our environment, we have Unix user IDs and Windows user IDs, and then of course you've got your native WebSphere user IDs. You want them to be unique across each of those repositories, otherwise you will have problems. One thing that you can do to make them unique is Unix is case sensitive. Windows is not. So if you use uppercase characters for Windows authentication, then it'll know to go there. But you really do want to have them unique in some format. At EHI, we do have 3 environments. We have a lab environment, which is where our group does all our testing, and if we want to test out new things like how do we do LDAP, that's where we do it first. Then we have a development environment where our developers do their work in creating their jobs that they want to eventually promote into production. And then we have our production environment. You may have fewer environments or more, but these 3 are what I would recommend for as a minimum, because you don't want to impact other users when you're testing things. So that's why you would want a lab environment just for your group. And then of course development is where you would roll things out, and if there are issues there that you didn't detect in the lab, at least you've protected production before you've gone further. And then we also have a change management environment where we log all our changes so that when we do make plans to roll things out into development production, we do have a record of what we're doing so that people can make proper approvals and also get notification through those changes as they're being approved. Also, later on, I will be showing how you need certificates when you're doing authentication. And you do need to keep track of the expiration dates of those certificates so that you can renew them and pull them in to your environment before they expire. And always make a checklist of the work that you need to do because it's very easy sometimes as you're going through this process or any other process to skip a step that could be critical and cause you issues down the road, which you then spend a lot of time trying to troubleshoot to figure out what went wrong. When you're creating your, before you actually do LDAP authentication, you really want to consider the design of the environment. For example, the various roles in your environment. We have basic roles like administrators. You know, they're the ones that can do everything, add users, modify roles, that sort of thing. Then you have operators, which you know, monitor the jobs, do the alerting, contact the application teams when there are problems. They can restart, cancel, submit jobs. You may also want to give them the ability to update user passwords and modify calendars and modify jobs in production. Then, of course, you have developers, the application teams. You would give them operator privileges in your development environment if you have one. And then, of course, in our environment, you only want them to have view in production because you really don't want them doing things, killing jobs and whatnot, and impacting production. And then, of course, we have service accounts. You may or may not have those that can react to jobs as they're running in the environment and submit new jobs or resubmit jobs when a job fails, or submit another job to try to fix a problem that has occurred in the environment. And those service accounts, you need to decide what roles you want to give to them, like submit and kill. If in our environment, we only do submit for service accounts. So as you're deciding what all the roles are, that's how you would decide what LDAP groups you want to create. So, because basically you want to do groups based on roles. And so that way, when it comes to assigning what roles each group has, you'll already have a clear delineation for that. And here are some helpful commands. RMasters are on Unix environments. So this is the Unix format for the wsadmin command, where you can search for users in your LDAP groups and also look for groups that have been created. And in those commands, you notice I have an asterisk listed. Be very careful. You really don't want to use the asterisks if you have a large number of items that can be returned by any of those commands. We're talking sometimes there can be thousands. So you really do want to put actual ASCII characters in there and not just an asterisk all by itself. And of course, you really want to back up your environment before you do any major changes. So there's a IBM documentation that mentions the backup config command and how do you use it. And this will back up key WebSphere files for you. And I highly recommend doing this before you start doing your LDAP authentication configuration. And actually, I have a job that does this on a daily basis, just in case someone is doing something. I have a history of changes in the environment, and I can roll back to any day if I need to. Also, when you're doing LDAP authentication, sometimes a certificate can get revoked. You didn't check on the expiration date and didn't get to it in time. Well, if you update your security XML file, you can set these permissions here so that if the certificate does get revoked, your people still can log into your environment. So that does give you some play there. Then, all right, so now we're going to go into how do we do it. The first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set up an encrypted channel, because you really don't want user IDs and passwords going through your network in clear text. You want it encrypted, so you want an SSL connection between your LDAP server and your WebSphere server. And so we need to do trust the certificates between LDAP and your WebSphere. So the first thing you will need to do is you log into your Integrated Solutions console. And as I mentioned, actually I haven't mentioned this part. In our environment, we have an active backup master, an MDM and a BKM using IBM's terminology. And so on both of those, either one can be act as the master in your environment. And we load a WebSphere as well as TWS on each of those servers. So we have the Integrated Solution Console because of that on 2 servers in each environment. So if you have a similar situation where you have more than one WebSphere server, then you actually have to do this configuration on the Integrated Solution Console on each one of those servers. And having multiple servers has a handy point in that you can schedule maintenance, as well as if you have a server failure. So if your master goes down, you can then tell everyone connect to your backup master, and they can continue to view the environment as you do your promotion of making it the true master of the environment. And I just realized I've jumped ahead a little here. I do have some poll questions. So let's go ahead and bring up some poll questions before I proceed any further here.
Sure thing. Always a good time for poll questions.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. First poll is currently active. Do you currently use Active Directory and LDAP with WS? And the answers of yes and no. So go ahead and vote. We'll leave it open here for 25, 30 seconds to let everyone get their chance to cast a vote here. I'll leave it open a little bit longer. We got the majority of the audience, but still a few people that could vote if they like. All right, so for the first one is almost right down the middle. Of those who currently use Active Directory and LDAP, it's 51% were yes, and 49% did not. That's pretty close. So we have another poll question to follow that up. Of those of you who are using it, how long have you been using it? Less than a year, 1 to 3 years, or more than 3 years? I'll leave this one open for another 5, 10 seconds. All right. So it looks like 30% are less than a year, 40% The bulk are 1 to 3 years, and then the remaining 30% are more than 3 years. So that's great. We have one more poll for everybody. For those of you who do not currently use AD with LDAP, how many plan to integrate it and when? And we have less than 1 year and in the next 2 years. I'll leave it open for a little bit longer. For those of you who currently do not use it, 67% of you plan to integrate in less than a year and 33% in the next 2 years. So I'll hand that back to you, Ray.
Okay. All right. Okay, so basically you open your integrated solution console and you expand your security tree, and then you go to SSL SSL certificate key management, and then you click on key stores and certificates, and then you'll then click on Node Default Trust Store, and then you on the right-hand side you'll see Signer Certificates. You click on that, and then once you're there, there'll be a button to Retrieve from Port, and this is where you'll put in the host name of your Active Directory server. And for us, encrypted communication goes across port 636. Your environment may be different. You then provide an alias for that. We just call it EHI -NA for North America -LDAP. And then you click on the Retrieve Signer Information. And that will give you a big list of what all's in the certificate. But the important things will be at the bottom, will be the certificate expiration. So you do need to keep track of that and make note that you'll have to probably around that date go check to see if they have a new certificate installed and replace your current one that you have. Then you click OK and then Save. And now you see that I have the EHI and a LDAP certificate stored. And then you can log out of your integrated solution console, restart with to make sure that it is aware of that certificate. Sometimes the synchronizing of certificates is not all that great, so bouncing always helps. And if you want to take another backup at this point, it would not hurt. Just make sure that you don't overwrite your current one. And now we're going to do the connection to the LDAP server. So you log back into your integrated solution console, you expand security, go to global security. And by the way, this example is with TDWC 8.6, but I've noticed that it doesn't seem like it changes much between versions. So hopefully yours will look a lot like this. And then when you get into the configure, you'll notice that you should, with 8.6 and up, federated repositories should already be available for you. I believe with 8.5.1 they weren't, and you have to set them up. And I actually had issues with 8.5.1, so I actually waited for LDAP until I got to 8.6. So if you are an 8.5 person, you really want to play it with it in the lab before you do this. And then you click on Configure once you have Federated Repository selected. And then you click on Add a base entry to a realm. And basically the realms that we have is we have the local WebSphere accounts. Our master, since it's on a Unix box, and we do have Unix IDs, we have local OS authentication, and that is usually there by default in your federated repositories already. And then all we did was add a repository for LDAP. And of course, to keep consistency with my certificates and everything else, I like to use standard names. So I called my repository EHI-NA-LDAP. Then the LDAP server type, you've got lots of choices. With us, it was Microsoft Windows Active Directory. And then on that same screen, you will enter your primary host name. And of course, that's not a real host name, but and then our port 636, the one that we pulled their certificate in from. And then I always like to, for referrals from LDAP servers, I chose follow. So that way, if one LDAP server sends you to another one because they didn't have the accounts or group that you were looking for, it would refer to the other domain server and hopefully then find what you need. All right, the bind distinguished name needs to be entered in, and your Active Directory administrators should be able to give you what your bind distinguished name is, because it's not going to be a simple user ID just all by itself. It's going to be a comma separated list. And then of course your bind set password, which in our case is the Windows ID password that we are able to set ourselves and change. Your login properties, we use UID and mail to differentiate accounts. And we make sure that require SSL communications is checked, because we don't want clear text across the network, and centrally managed. And then you click on OK, and if you've entered everything incorrectly, you'll get the window to save your configuration, and you click on the save there. And and of course you can also set your distinguished name. For example, if you don't want to be able to authenticate everybody in your Active Directory domain, you can actually go down the tree some and further so that only the people that you need are listed there. Just be aware that if eventually down the road that people in other groups that you didn't include in this entry here need access, you're going to have to go back and redo your LDAP authentication. So be careful what you choose here. So then you click on OK again and save. And then you'll then see your listed repositories that you have in your federated repository. And like I said, we have local OS for the Unix accounts. We have the WebSphere repository, and now we have our LDAP. And of course, that's the tree that we have set up to go down for our EHI and LDAP. And then you can click on OK again, and again you do a save, and then that'll bring you back to your configuration screen where you can click on Apply. And then once you do that, you get to save again. And then there's one further step. So right now, people actually can authenticate in your environment, but you'll run into other issues if you don't do this extra little step, your certificate key management. So you'll have to go back in your integrated solution console, security SSL certificate and key management, click on that. Then click on Manage Endpoint Security Configurations. Move my mouse over here. There we go. And then there will be an inbound and outbound connection settings. You will be modifying both of those. So right now we're going to start with the inbound, and then you click on the tip node, no default SSL settings. And then by default, it'll say certificate alias in key store is set to none. You actually want to set it to the alias that you have set up for your server certificate for your WebSphere server. And then click Apply, and then Save. And then you'll go back into your certificate and key management environment, and then do your outbound connection. And do the same thing, change the certificate alias from none to your server certificate alias that you have set up for your certificate. Then you log out, restart WebSphere, and then like I said, you need to do this if you have more than one WebSphere server, like we do. You need to make sure that you do this on each one of those in your environment. And at this point, you can now do your dumpsec, makesec to set up your configuration, your security configuration, so that it uses your LDAP groups once you've validated that you can log in. And then usually what I do is, just in case there are problems with LDAP, I do have WebSphere user IDs, like you may have a TWS WEM already set up. You may want to set up other accounts for some of your administrators in your group in there as well. Just make sure that they're unique. They don't match a Unix ID or an LDAP ID. And then grant them administrator access in the integrated solutions console, so that if LDAP does go down for whatever reason, you do have people that can go in and troubleshoot and manage the environment that way. And if you have all three repositories set up in, like I said, WebSphere, local OS, in our case it's Windows, Unix, and then LDAP Windows, you can set up groups for your Unix IDs as well as your Windows Active Directory groups in your security file. So you're not limited just to LDAP groups in that case. And we actually do that as well. And so your security file would look something like this. Our TWS admins, you would have your group instead of user, and you would have your group name set up. And so you no longer have to have a long list of users in each of your stanzas in your dumpsec makesec file. Also, in your TDWC, you have your Active Directory groups should be available there to be selected to be added to your various roles to be configured there. So don't forget, you do need to set them up in your security file and in TDWC, because those two are not the same. They're mutually exclusive. Um, and I guess now we can go to questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Ray. We will indeed open it up for questions. For those of you who might have missed at the beginning, if you would like to ask a question, please do so using the chat window located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Right, one question we had, is there any limitations when you have read permissions and not write permissions to Active Directory?
That's a good question. Basically, if you have read permissions, well, actually, IBM's documentation actually says that they want read-write permissions to Active Directory, and the reason for that is when you're in your TDWC and you're setting up the permissions, if you assign roles to your Active Directory groups, it will try to write those into Active Directory. And so if you have write permissions, it'll actually update the Active Directory group and put those roles in there. But in most cases, like at EHI, you have a separate group that does Active Directory, and they'll give you read permissions only. And so you won't be able to assign roles to groups. The way around that is you go into the roles side in the TDWC, and you put your Active Directory group into each role. So you assign groups to roles instead of roles to groups when you have read permission. It is a lot more steps to go that route, but if you have separation like we do, that's the only way to go. So it is a lot more steps to set up, but like I said, once you have it configured and you have all your groups, different groups set up for different types of permissions and roles, then you only have to do it once. You don't have to redo it ever again. So it can be quite a bit of work at the beginning, but you save work later on.
Great. Another question we had come in, it's a little bit long, so bear with me here. We have an issue where everyone's user IDs changed. Now any old tasks in TDWC that were set up with old user IDs are showing up in everyone's tasks. They're not able to edit and delete since they no longer exist. Is there any way to remove these tasks or old user IDs?
Ooh, yeah, that's a, yeah, I think that's an PMR because usually what we do is we have people that do like to share their task with others, and we tell them, no, please don't do that because of this problem. Because only the owner of the task can modify it, and if they leave, then yeah, you're left with those old tasks hanging around. So when people do start sharing with everyone, we always send them a note, please don't share your task. Everyone should set up their own task for themselves, and then that will save you some heartache in the future. But yeah, it is painful to do it that way, but I don't know of any other way to fix it. My guess is that it is stored in a database somewhere, and you probably could tweak those, but I don't know where that's stored. That would be a IBM PMR.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? Now's the time. You got your expert here, and he's ready to go. Well, all right. Well, Ray, you might have covered the topic so well that there just aren't any questions, so good work there.
All right.
If anyone does have any additional questions after this, we can get with Ray and make sure to answer. Oh, here's one that came through. Was the certificate mentioned related to the LDAP-AD certificate?
Yes, that's a certificate that you're going to read to allow your WebSphere server to trust the LDAP server. But also, when when WebSphere is installed, it also has a certificate, and you need to use that's the one we're playing with here is your WebSphere certificate also, because that's a certificate that it's using to communicate with the broker as well as with your LDAP server. And if you have none set up for your WebSphere server certificate, that you can end up with problems, and we actually did, and IBM had to actually help us out with that. So that's now part of our LDAP configuration. If you're doing server signed certificates at your site like we do, that means you probably have to update your certificate on a regular basis. We do it every 2 years. And so every time you regen a WebSphere certificate, you'll have to remember to double check that this information did not change. As long as you keep your alias the same when you update your server certificate, it should remain, but I'm paranoid, so I still go in there and double check to make sure that the alias on the certificate for your WebSphere server is still there for your inbound and outbound connection.
Excellent. Let's see, and hold on a sec if any other questions come through, but if not, like we were saying, we'll work with Ray here if any questions come up after the call's over to address any additional needs. But we'll hold out here a second and see if any other last-minute questions filter through real quick. All right, well, Ray, I think that might be about it. So thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it very much, and it looks like it covered the topic very well.
Okay, cool. Y'all have a good day.
Indeed, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. As you do exit the webcast, please take a few moments to fill out your post-event survey and help us improve our future events. We truly appreciate the feedback. But this concludes today's conference, so as Ray said, have a fantastic day.